Hey, this is Jessica, and I am an Enneagram life coach, which is a personality typology that helps us understand ourselves to greater extents. And therefore, once we learn this personality typology, it helps us to understand the people we love better also. Its primary use, though, of course, is first to understand oneself. Because to some degree, it doesn't really matter for us to try to figure out our spouses and our friends and our siblings and our coworkers if we don't know anything about ourselves. So one of the things that personality typologies, including the Enneagram, do is it puts us on the map. It helps us understand, where are we coming from? How do we see the world? How do we frame the world differently than other people? And how does that affect our communication, our come from, our show up, our reactions, all the things. So I'm going to start today by giving a very broad overview of 3 of the 9 Enneagram types. And these 3 types are what we call head types, or sometimes they're called the thinking types. The reason that we call them that is because the Enneagram typology theorizes that although every human clearly has a head where they can do their thinking, a heart where they can feel their emotions, and a gut where they feel animal instincts, most of us lean into one of those 3 centers of intelligence more than we do the other 2. So every single human is capable of using their head, their heart, their gut, but we habitually use one of those. And because of our overuse of that one area, whichever one it happens to be, we are in some ways really gifted and skilled in that area, but in other ways we have massive blind spots. So I like to maybe make this the metaphor of, think about your senses, your regular senses, right? You have sight, you have smell, you have touch, you have taste, you have hearing. Okay, but let's say there were only 3 senses. There's 5, but for this illustration, let's say there's seeing, hearing, and tasting. It's the intelligence centers in the Enneagram are sort of like if you only tried to learn the world through seeing, but you never tried to listen and you never tried to taste. You'd be able to see certain things, but you would miss out on all noise and you would miss out on all flavors, which is to say you would not be really getting a well-rounded understanding of the world. That's a simplistic way of thinking how it is with our heads, our emotions, and our guts. So Enneagram is a typology that has 9 different types of personalities in it. And all of us, each person, just naturally falls into one of those 9 types. The best and highest use of the Enneagram is to identify which of those main types is like your home base, the one that you just naturally fall into. By the way, your number never changes. You've been the same number since you were an infant as you are now. However, Enneagram, as we talked about in a previous video, is a dynamic system. And that means that even though you are one type in your home base, you can and do, even without knowing the system, move around to the other numbers. Because a better way to think of the Enneagram is all 9 types are the 9 general ways that humans show up in the world. And they're all valid, and they all have their strengths, and they all have their weaknesses. So we're all born into one of those types. 3 of the types are in the head center, the thinking center. 3 of them are in the heart, or the emotion center, and 3 of them are in the gut, or the instinctual or body center. So today I'm going to talk about the 3 head types. So head type people are using their, we'll call it a sense of cerebral capabilities primarily to experience the world. So when we come from the head center, we're not using our hearts, meaning we're not really reading people or trying to emotionally connect. That's not what's going on so much at the head center. We're also not sensing things like instinctually. We're not like having a feeling about a person or a job we should take. It's not like that. We're actually thinking through. So it's like it's sort of like equation, like A plus B equals C. Therefore, I'm going to do this and that. There's a lot of planning that goes on in the thinking center. There's a lot of strategizing that goes on. Each of the three centers, according to Enneagram theory, are sort of caught in a trap of a negative emotion. And the dominant negative emotion that head types experience is fear. So what's happening is, because head types, which in the Enneagram system are numbers 5, 6, and 7, because their primary underlying dominant negative emotion is one of fear, and that's usually subconscious. Usually head types do not know that they are experiencing the world as fearfully as they are. But compared to the other types of people, they are noticing what could go wrong. They are noticing dangers. They're noticing maybe that it can be something like they don't feel secure about how their future is going to pan out, because when they play it forward, they think like, oh, I don't know if I'll have the right job, or if I'll live in the right place, or if I'll be in the best relationships, or if I'll have enough fun, or if I'm prepared. So the head types 5, 6, and 7 spend a lot of time strategizing or planning for their future, or gathering information that could help them have a better now and a better future, or maybe getting educated or reading or taking in information, which is, by the way, why I started with this one, because because head types, or people who are really interested in information, sometimes tend to be in some ways more interested in learning about Enneagram, right? Because I'm literally giving you information right now. That's what this video is. So people who are prone to look for information to plan and prepare for their lives might be interested in a video like this. So I will make other videos for the heart types and for the body types, but right now we're talking about head types. So even if you're not a head type, like I said, you still know what it is to plan. You still know what it is to have fear. You still know what it is to feel like you need to be prepared. You know, these are not experiences that exclusively head type people feel, but it is their dominant experience, whether or not they're conscious of it. Because remember, another key component of Enneagram work is, before you learn the system, most of it is subconscious. So this is one of the things that differentiates it from other personality typologies that talk about what the result is, like how it looks in the world. So if it's somebody who is learning a lot, right? Like that's like an activity, somebody who is interested in learning. But why are they interested in learning? Well, Enneagram would say, well, they're interested in learning because they're afraid somehow that if they don't learn, or if they don't know, they're going to make a misstep, or they're going to go to the wrong place, or they're going to end up in a bad situation, or they won't be prepared, or people are going to take advantage of them. So this is the world that head types live in. Subconscious low-level anxiety, or it might be conscious anxiety, but it could definitely be subconscious as well. And we'll start with type 5. And again, I'm just going to do a brief overview because I don't want to have really long videos. I plan on in the future giving you more in-depth videos on each type. But for right now, let's just talk about the 3 head types, which are 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so type 5, we'll start with them. Type 5s, again, right? So they live in a world that seems dangerous, and they are thinking. They are just wired to think. And these people are really the most cerebral types of people. So the archetype that might come to mind is somebody who is like so smart, knows so much information, maybe math and science and STEM type subjects, but maybe even almost aloof, or seemingly detached, or seemingly not able to be like relational or have like conversations. These people, to the extreme, making an extreme archetype here, these are the people who are like so in their heads that it's very hard for them to be embodied. That would be the gut center, to be embodied in the world, or even to have emotional connections or reactions. So people who come from type 5 are experiencing the world as very dangerous, and they're response to that anxiety is if they can collect enough information, if they have enough data, if they can learn enough, then they will be safe because they will know how to do all the things. And also, truth be told, type 5s are, in some ways, you could say they're not as interested in being entangled with people as the other 8 types. And they really want to be autonomous. And they sort of, a lot of 5s would love to just go live out in the woods and be by themselves most of the time. These people don't need or crave as much human interaction as other types. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's totally valid. I'm not saying they can't have good relationships. I'm not saying they can't live a full life. I'm not saying there's something wrong with them. I'm just saying that they don't have a real high level need for human interaction. A lot of times type 5s will have 1 or 2 friends, maybe, and that's sufficient for them. They don't want to be the life of the party. They don't want a lot of attention drawn to them. They are what we call withdrawn types. They tend to be on the quiet side. If in terms of extroversion or introversion, they tend to be pretty introverted, and they're very content. These people are, it's funny, type 5s are actually quite friendly. I don't want you to think they're cranky. They're not necessarily cranky. They just want to spend time learning about their projects. They have the sense that there's not enough time in this lifetime to learn or to gather all the information that they would like to gather. And so they tend to have a lot of interests, personal interests, endeavors that things they might want to read about. Maybe they're interested in botany, or maybe they're interested in the solar system, or maybe in building, or maybe in computers, or maybe it's usually technical type stuff though. They're not, again, relationships are not usually front and center for them. It's not that they can't have them. It's not that they don't have them, but that's not the primary thing for them. They're trying to learn, very task-oriented type mindset, and they sort of like being alone. So, one of the things that's crazy to me, and you'll hear me say more about this because I really harp on this a lot, but a lot of times people accuse 5s of, well, any of the types, when they are just showing up naturally as their type tends to show up, people who don't understand them like to assign, how would you say, defective, maybe diagnoses to them, oh, people who are 5s, they have disorders, right? People love to ascribe disorders. And so with type 5s, people love to say, oh, I think they have some kind of interaction disorder, or, they don't understand people, or they can't. And it is true that they don't put their energy into understanding people as much as other types, but they don't want to understand people. It's by design. And that's not a fault. It's just perhaps different than how the accuser is. The accuser who's making this accusation that they have some sort of disorder. So all of the personality types tend to get labeled with disorders from people who don't have a broad knowledge of human personality. And I think a lot of times 5s, people will assume that they have Asperger's, or people will assume that they are somehow on the spectrum, or people will assume that there's something wrong with their connecting capacities. And I'm not a doctor and I'm not a therapist, but I will say even the healthiest 5 is not that interested in pursuing personalities first or pursuing relationships first and foremost. And that's perfectly fine. We need 5s to do their technical work because that's what they offer to the world. Their gifts is they tend to be good at technical things. They tend to be behind the scenes workers. They tend to know things in great, great depth and detail. They're not surface learners. If they're interested in something, they're going to deep dive. And we need people like that. That's what keeps the electricity on in our houses. And that's what builds buildings. And that's what, makes doctors. And that's what makes professors. And so think of people who are into deep knowledge, not so much they're not party animals usually. Like they're not that interested in interacting, but they're very interested in their certain topics that they are fascinated by. So Enneagram teaches that each of the types has a vice, and the vice at 0.5, depending on which Enneagram teacher you're following, is usually something like avarice or it's like hoarding, but it's not hoarding stuff. It's more hoarding their emotions, hoarding their affection, sometimes hoarding their knowledge. Fives don't talk a lot. They're pretty quiet. They're usually pretty stone-faced. They don't show a lot of facial expressions. Sometimes they're not that great at reading facial expressions either. But again, that's a function of, that's not where their attention goes. Our personality is formed by where our attention goes, and their attention goes towards their cerebral interests and their thinking and their analyzing and their data collection. And so, yeah, they're not good at reading people because they don't spend their time reading people, but they're really good at technical things that the rest of us don't spend time on. So their vice can be avarice. And for each of the types, there's usually a counter virtue that they can lean into for personal growth. And when it comes to 5, the part that they can lean into is something like abundance, realizing that there is enough to go around. So 5s have this feeling that they're going to be catastrophically depleted if they interact with humans, that people want too much of them, want more of them than what they're capable of offering. And that makes them retreat and isolate because they just don't want any more demands on their time. They're trying to learn what they want to learn, and they want to do what they want with their own time, and they want autonomy. And it can feel to them like they're being intruded on regularly by people, and so that's why they isolate. But if they would hold off that avarice and recognize that the more they retreat from people, kind of the more people are going to intrude on them. So like if you're a 5 and you're locking yourself in your room all the time and your spouse is knocking on the door, oh, are you okay in there? What's going on in there? If you would just communicate to your spouse that you need some alone time and that you do need more alone time than other types of people, and that's totally fine, but just let them know what's going on, because generally 5s don't say anything, which leaves the rest of us guessing, and we guess very poorly because we don't come from that same space, so we make bad assumptions, and then we put our assumptions on the type 5. If the type 5 would just vocalize what's going on, it would be a lot easier for the rest of us to get along with them, but also to give them the space and private time they need. Okay, that's type 5. Let's move on to type 6. Type 6s are also cerebral people. Okay, so they live in a world that seems dangerous, seems risky, seems like you can't really trust people. The vice at 6 is fear itself. Sometimes this is conscious and sometimes it's not. But basically, a 6 lives in a world where, consciously or not, they believe that there are lots of things that could go wrong in this world. And so if they're paying attention in the correct way, they can avoid all of the things that could go wrong by being prepared or by making good decisions up front. A lot of times 6s won't say they're afraid, they'll say they're prepared. But truth be told, really what's happening is they're very nervous that things will go wrong in their job and their family and their life and their health and their relationships and their day. I mean, 6s tend to catastrophize, or at least that's how it feels to people who aren't 6s. But they're not catastrophizing because they're trying to be Debbie Downers. What's happening is they feel a lot of negative emotion, especially fear and self-doubt, and sometimes self-loathing. 6s usually have a hard time seeing themselves as strong or as worthy or as capable of making good decisions. So they tend to vacillate a lot. 6s, this fear that is their vice, really stops them and can give them analysis paralysis. Like they don't know how to move forward in life because they're nervous about what could go wrong. And they think about option A and okay, but then this, but then what if I did B? Oh no, then this, then what about C? Oh no, then this, D. Oh, it seems like this is, and so any person, no matter what your Enneagram type, if you're feeling fear and if you're feeling like things aren't going to work out or you're unsure of yourself, what are you going to do? You're not going to move forward. That's what fight flight or freeze is, our animal instincts, right? You're just going to sort of hold in one place because you don't know what to do. You don't know how to make a forward step because, you're concerned that you might make the wrong move. That's where sixes get stuck. The virtue to get them out of their fear is something like courage or believing in themselves. Sixes tend to trust other people more than they trust themselves. And even if they trust themselves, there are some types of sixes who tend to trust themselves more than other types of sixes, but they'll then doubt themselves. So they'll make a decision and they'll, in their minds, they're going to go forward with this decision, but then they'll second guess themselves. Oh, should I really have made that decision? I don't know. Maybe I didn't make it well. Maybe I should reconsider that. So they have a really hard time with forward momentum because fear stops them in their tracks. And that's what fear does for all of us. I mean, that is the sort of like the function of fear, evolutionarily speaking, is to stop us and let us know that there could be danger ahead in the future. But what happens in the world of a six and the way the world presents itself to them, they didn't ask for this. This is just what they notice, is that there's a lot of danger out here in this world. And they're not wrong. It's valid. There is a lot of danger in the world. What sixes don't realize is the rest of us might notice that danger, but we just do it afraid. And that's the courage and that's the self-trust that can help a six get out of that funk and get out of that analysis paralysis and also get out of that self-loathing, because another thing sixes don't necessarily see, obviously, is that they are not any less capable than the rest of us. In fact, if they do their work and they do their research, which they usually do, because remember their head type, so they're looking for information and they're cerebral processors, if they look at the information, they can really make an educated guess, and that's good enough. And another thing is sixes are very concerned about what they would call failure. They don't want to fail. And that's also a problem because to learn anything, you have to fail. There's no way to get good at anything without being willing to fail. So you have to look like a jerk, to learn to ride your bike because you're going to fall. Like that's just what happens. Nobody gets on their bike and never falls off. And you understand that when we talk about children, but for some reason, sixes somehow assume when they get into adulthood that they should just try things and be excellent right away. And that's not how it works. And they can be so concerned about failure that they don't apply themselves. But really what a six should know is they are just as capable. They are good at collecting information. And at their high end, when they are courageous and when they are self-trusting, actually, even in their average levels of health, sixes are really good friends. They're very funny. A lot of comedians are sixes. Sixes are, when they're in a good mood, they're pretty good natured and they're really fun to be around. They're very warm. They're jovial. They can be jokey. They can be fun loving. They like friendships. And part of that is security based because being around people who they know and trust makes them feel secure. And so when you live in that kind of a world, you do seek out relationships. So this is opposite than the five. The five is isolating and really doesn't want anything to do with people. The five does trust themselves. They're not trying to get other people's opinions. The five would much rather have their own opinion than somebody else's. And that's because they'll do their research and they trust themselves to be able to do their research. We get into six space. They don't trust themselves like that. They feel like they're going to consult an expert first. They don't want to make forward progress without asking a doctor and maybe even 3 doctors and getting some other opinions and then asking their spouse and asking their parents. That's a big one. Asking their siblings, asking their, sixes tend to look for advice externally because they don't trust themselves. And that's what happens at six space. But they are really good team players. They're not really loners. Sixes are, their habit of being is to be close to people or to groups or to institutions that they believe that make them feel safer, because remember they have a lot of fear, but they feel safer following the rules of the institutions or of the authorities or of the experts. And again, they like to subconsciously, they're externalizing their courage and their life decisions. They are not really trusting themselves to be able to find their own way. But secret is they're just as capable as anybody else. And that's what sixes learn when they do their Enneagram work. Okay, and then the last head type is type 7. So we've talked about 5s who deal with their fears by isolating, learning about more data, and hoping that one day they'll have enough information to re-enter the world in an educated way. Very seeking autonomy, seeking not so much to be connected to people. Then we go to type 6, and type 6s also experience the world as a scary place, but even to a greater extent perhaps than type 5s. And worse, they don't trust themselves. So they don't know where to go for answers. They will do their research and they will learn and they will read, but they will also consult the experts outside of themselves. And so they are more interested in making connections and dealing with institutions and ideologies that can help them navigate this scary world. And then we get to point 7, and point 7s also experience the world as a scary place. But the way that 7s deal with it is basically just trying to ignore their fears, have fun, have an enjoyable day, and kind of like escape. 7s are escapists, and they will subconsciously deal with their fear by finding distractions, by staying engaged in the external world. Whatever is out in the world, the 7 runs into to have an adventure, to have an exciting experience. So 7s like traveling, and they like all the different foods and all the music and all the dancing and all the fun and all the parties. And 7s are, they look like they're having the best time ever. The archetype of the 7 is like the life of the party, the person who is playful, carefree, not a worry in the world, happy-go-lucky, optimistic. 7s are so optimistic. We talked about 6s seeming a little pessimistic because they can notice everything that'll go wrong. 7s do the opposite of that. 7s see the world as a landscape of opportunities to bring so much joy and excitement and happiness, and they are subconsciously in that space trying to avoid the anxiety dragon that is like coming down on them and making them, well, just scared. I don't know how to say it. So people who come from 7 space tend to have bright eyes. They tend to be cheerful. They tend to, again, you would not know they're afraid, and they might not know they're afraid. But what's happening is they're dealing with their insecurities by escapism. And they don't necessarily look like cerebral types. You might wonder what this has to do with a thinker. Why is a 7 a thinker? I told you 5s gather a lot of data and 6s like to prepare. Well, what does 7 do? Well, 7 is planning and strategizing, and constantly their brains are going to, what could make this moment better? What could make this day better? What could make my week better? My life, how could I plan another vacation? So they're in their heads planning the next great thing that they're going to do, type thing. The vice at 7 is gluttony. And that's a word you don't really hear much these days. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're eating too much food, although they could be. But gluttony here is a gluttony of the mind. It's a gluttony of ideas. 7s are obsessed with innovating and new ideas, novelty and new trends and, new types of food and new cultures and new experiences and new travels. And so their brains are constantly on autopilot, navigating towards the next fun thing. And it's a very cerebral experience. It's not so much done in their heart, and it's not so much done in their gut. It's done with, this, then I'll do this. Okay, so first I'm going to get up and I'm going to have a great cup of coffee, and then I'm going to garden, and then I'm going to call a friend. Oh, and if she's busy, then I'll call another friend, and then I'll go we'll go get lunch together, and then we'll go to an art exhibit, and then that's how it is to be in the mind of a 7. It's all the fun things that you're going to plan. And then as soon as like a blockade comes in that blocks one of those fun plans, you divert to like plan B, but it's a fun plan. And it's very optimistic, and 7s are somehow subconsciously hoping that void or that fear that they're feeling, that anxiety that's just below the surface, is going to go away if they just keep staying busy. So 7s don't stop. They're like hummingbirds. They go, 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 go. And they definitely don't want to know about their own emotions at all. So the 7 game is to stay really busy and stay really occupied and make everything way better than it is because everything is so amazing. A movie that really embodies 7 space is The Greatest Showman. And that main character, you know, like when he's if you've never seen the movie, is a guy who's starting a circus. And when, you know, like he's looking for like people that have like oddities or freaks and oddities, you know, to do a show for the circus. And I remember like this guy shows up and he's overweight. This is like a long time ago when not everybody was overweight. And he's overweight enough to be in the circus. And the main character, who is coming from 7 space, asks the guy how much he weighs. And I don't remember what he says. He says like 250 or something. And then the 7 says, okay, 450, right? Like, let's just make everything more crazy and more extravagant and over the top. Lots of exaggerating happens in 7 space. 7s tend to be very animated, using their hands to talk a lot. I wasn't quite going to say it, but I might as well. I come from 7 space. Spoiler alert, I come from 7. But I know what it is to be 6 and I know what it is to be 5, right? Because we can learn to go into these other types of ways of being. But when I am stuck in my 7, and I've been practicing this long enough that I can notice it. I get amped up and it's like my energy is just like coming out of the top of me like a volcano, like a fun volcano or like an exciting or enjoyable volcano. And the gluttony is, give me all the things. Let me have all the experiences. The virtue to counter the gluttony is usually it's called sober work. Sober meaning be realistic. Work means something like be focused on things that matter instead of chasing unicorns. My word for me personally, sober work is a good one. I like that one. But what really makes me cringe is serious responsibility. Oh, I'm going to throw up in my mouth when I say that word. But that's a clue to me that that's probably the word I need to focus on. So serious responsibility for me means focusing on one thing at a time and deep diving into it, to not be so escapist, to not be, 7s tend to be committed to something until it gets difficult or until it's uncomfortable. Or, I mean, that's not like what we plan to do, but we'll make a commitment, you know, get a job and you're like, yeah, this job's going to be so great. And then, you know, I don't know, you have a difficult boss and you're like, well, I'm going to quit. I'm going to find another job. It's running from everything. The lesson for the 7 is prosper where you're planted. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. I know the gluttony churns and makes you want to go, 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 but there's no more happiness out there than there is right here. So that's the sober work. That's the serious responsibility. Just dig your heels in, do the hard thing. We are made for doing hard things, all humans, but including 7s. And every second of life doesn't have to be enjoyable, 7. You can that there's no such thing as a life that's fully enjoyable 100% of the time. That's fake. That's manufactured happiness. And it feels to a 7 like somehow we can actually create a life that's happy all the time. And that's not reasonable. And when we believe that's true, it means we're not actually paying attention, because again, that's just not the nature of life. There is enjoyment and life is wonderful and there are many magical things to celebrate, and there are times to do sober work and to focus and to do the laundry and clean the house and run 5 miles and get your car fixed and do all the things that aren't seemingly the most enjoyable and fun things. So that's a wrap, guys, for the head types. We will do other videos that cover the other types, and that's just an intro to types 5, 6, and 7. There's much more to be said, but I hope you got something out of this. Maybe you noticed some things that you do. Again, you don't have to be a 5, a 6, or a 7 to relate to what I shared with today. These are human ways of seeing the world. So even if your home base is not a type 5, 6, or 7, you can still relate to several of the things I said today. And those things are experienced for you, for all of us, when we are in our thinking space. So when we are in our heads, any human, no matter what your number, whether you're a head type or not, when we are in our heads, we are coming generally from one of those three places. Isolate and collect information, stay away from people, or no, find the people because they have the answers that I need, because I'm really not capable of making these decisions on my own. I need somebody who's an expert, and I want to be prepared, and I don't want to make a move forward until I know that I know that I know that I have certainty. That's 6. And then we go to 7, which is, you know what? Screw it. Let's just have a great time. Another margarita, please. Let's just have fun. Fun, fun, fun. I'm going to run from my problems. What problems? I don't even have problems. I have a wonderful life. Okay, no, you don't, girl. Sit down, do the work, do the sober work. And yeah, all of those, by the way, can be healed by trusting God to protect you. That's spoiler alert with all of the types. If we would trust God, instead of trying to do everything in our own strength, we wouldn't have to be so afraid. And yes, there are dragons in the world. And yes, it's uncomfortable and it's scary. And yes, we're taking steps in faith. But when we are connected to source and to spirit, God will lead us every step of the way. And we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. It's okay. All you got to do is stay connected to God today. That's how we deal with our anxiety. One moment at a time. In this moment, trusting God to be our security. Thanks for watching.